There were around 6 people who were interested in building something, right? Not just learning, but building something together. So we kind of had our first meeting, and we're going to have our next meeting. Let's see. It's going to be on every Friday, 7 p.m. Right? We're going to have this meeting. So we're going to basically build a team and help the team to come up with some idea and create something out of that, right? A project or a product that can be used for by other community members, or even, I don't know, if the product really comes out well, maybe those 5 guys can start their own company. I don't know, right? So it's kind of helping the people to really think different than a normal people would do, right? Just thinking to learn, just thinking to get job, but rather than that, thinking to build something, create something. So that's the thought process of that particular track. There is a channel, Testoper Hackathon channel in Microsoft Teams. If you are interested, you can just go and say, you're interested, and I can always include you into that call. So our next call is going to be on 7 p.m. This Friday, 7 to 8 p.m. this Friday. Sumit, have you joined back?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I was just filling your time by saying some, the useful stuff. Perfect. So the
Excellent.
last thing
I wasn't aware of the Friday sessions.
yeah, hackathon, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are interested, I have included Chad. I know that you are busy with this, so if you want, I'll also add you into that. Right? We wanted to kind of do that. And then that in our Testoper community, there are other channels which I wanted you to really make use of. There is a jobs channel where we post jobs, whoever, in the community, in their company, if there is a job opening, or there are some recruiters in our community, they just come and post their jobs in that Testoper jobs channel. So 2 things, right? I encourage you guys to look at it, and if it is applicable, apply for it. And also in your company, if there is any jobs that's coming up, just to put that link in this jobs channel, so other persons in the community can make use of that. It's critical that we all help each other. End of the day, Testoper community is run by all of us, right? It's a non-profit. It's not for profit, as you know. Then we also have channels for study groups. Joy is leading. We created a channel for Tech Teaser. You need to really go and look at them, right? Every week there is a topic that put into the Tech Teaser, and a lot of people respond to that and learn together, share their expertise, and it's more or less like chat-based back and forth discussion. The Tech Teaser is happening, so there's a lot of good things are happening. What's more important is you guys, in addition to just joining these sessions, keep install these Teams in your phone, and then be like what you do WhatsApp, right? Get yourself involved into the activities and build your skills and build other skills and help each other to grow together. That's more or less I wanted to say. Sumit, please take over the session.
Sure. So, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on some of the folks who were having issues with running Tavern. Do you guys still have issues running Tavern or Flask API? Anything? Any issues that you guys still have? Let's resolve it first and then move forward. So if no issues, I assume that everyone is able to run Tavern tests and everyone is able to run the APIs. Correct? Awesome.
Sumit, I actually saw a message from a person called Louis Ibla. Is he in the call today?
Sure.
Maybe he kind of misunderstood you for me. He thought maybe I'm a technical guy or something. He basically sent me this message. Let me post it here.
Sure. Whoever has issue, if they can't talk, just post the issue in the chat and I'll read that.
Okay. Okay.
So this error comes when you're not running talks command from inside the project folder. Because what it does is it tries to find the talks.inf file. But if it's not able to find the talks file, it will throw this error message. So whoever was running this is running outside the project folder. So once they move inside the project folder and run this command, this error will go away. A lot of folks had issues on the invocation error uh, on the PyTest. The reason is that the PyTest was not able to find your file. Either the naming convention is not correct or the YAML format is not correct. There are also, there might be a restriction if you're running through Windows, if you are running through an administrative space. So if you relocate your folder, you should be able to run those commands. So I see, couldn't find that app. So your app Flask Carlos is not in Heroku. So let me share my screen.
Hey Sumit, you are like an FAQ man. I'm really amazed. So it's like error code, and you know what the reason is. Awesome, man. Awesome.
Okay. So can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we can solve.
Okay. So when you so the best thing is to go to Heroku and then log in. Once you log in, it will take you to your personal space where it will show you how many apps you have. So whoever has this issue, if they log into their Heroku dashboard, they should see this app being there. Uh, the reason why this error is coming, either the app is not there or uh, or the naming convention that has been given here has some typos, uh, and then that's why it's not able to find that app. If the issue still persists, do one thing: uh, create the app from the UI itself and not from uh, the command line, and see if that resolves your issue. Make sense?
Sumit, just to interrupt one question here, can we delete these apps?
Yes, you can.
How can we do it?
So you can directly go here to this app. Let's say go to settings, and there below you should have this option called delete app.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay. I guess the issue is resolved now. Whoever. So Carlos, I see the app in Roku with the same name. I will try. Okay. Try creating a new app through the UI with a different name, and uh, try running this commit message or from your command line and see if that works or not. All right. Let me look at this again. Yeah. All right, great. So again, I'll repeat on the issue that people had with invocation error. A couple of folks had that. Change your YAML file name to .tavern.yaml if the name has already been changed. Second thing to do is to check the YAML format. If that is also correct, then the third thing to do is change the location of the directory and try running again. So Jiva did send me his project when he got this invocation error. Uh, and then once he gave me, I changed the YAML format and it started working. So
Okay, thank you. So what you mean by changing the name of that YAML file?
no, your YAML format had some issues. Uh,
Okay.
so once I did that, and don't forget to, once you change everything, don't uh, if it is still not working, try deleting the .talks folder.
Okay.
Right. So the .talks folder, what it does is it still creates a cache
Uh-huh.
of your executions. So once you delete that, it will remove all your previous dependencies and everything, and then install a new package for you.
Okay, we'll try that. Thanks.
No problems. So let's get started. So let me share my screen. Sure. Okay. Can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Right. So I updated the project that we previously created, uh, and it's on GitHub. So I'm going to start with some of the things that I'm going to talk about. Today, our session will be on external functions and complicated validations that we're going to do. And the next session will be on framework, right? There are a couple of points that I want to you guys to understand what kind of functionality uh, you can add on top of Tavern. The list is long, so I'm not going to go through every functionality, but I will tell you what all those functionalities are and how they work. I'll probably do a couple of external functions here, and then I'll walk you through the whole Tavern documentation to tell you what those functionalities are, right? So that will make it much more easier because there are a lot of them, right? So we cannot do it in one session. So I'll go through some of them so that you guys know how to add functionality on top of it. And then I'll walk you through all the functionalities on the Tavern documentation so that you know what functionalities exist and how you can use them. So we're gonna, and then you can actually pick up some of the functionalities and on top of this and as a practice, you can start adding those functionalities, right? So the first functionality that I'm going to talk about is the environment variables, right? Or the common variables. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to tell Tavern that we have a global configuration, right? This is more about reusing your configuration, right? So wherever it's much more easier to read and much more elaborate in terms of the understanding of your configuration, right? Otherwise, we'll keep repeating the same. So this is the idea, right? So just like a URL, right? If it is not in the configuration, wherever you have created those tests and you have put this URL, you need to change that URL in every place where you've mentioned that URL, right? The idea of having a global config is you keep the URL as an example at only one place, and whenever this changes, you change only at the configuration level and your test doesn't need to change.
Sumit, sorry, there have been requests to increase the font size.
Oh yeah, it's always the case. You're forgetting. Oh, it's on still on font. Okay. Can you guys see now?
Yes, Sumit. Good.
Okay, awesome. So this is a configuration. This is a parameter on top of PyTest, right? So the PyTest has certain options which we can add and which we uh, might not add, like add options here. TB short means that whatever message is coming out of the test logs. I want it short. I don't want it verbose. Then I won't be able to read it properly, and no logging to external files, right? Tavern strict JSON is off. What it means is when I'm doing a validation, it will strictly check for the whole JSON, right? And not pick up specific items from, so like the book version, right? The book version has 3 books. So I had to give the whole JSON in order to validate it because it's a strict validation, right? But if I just need to validate one title, I can do it with this option being off, right? And then we have a global config, which tells the test that where to pick those config from. So if I look at the config, it's pretty straightforward, which says uh, you can give any name that you want. It's just uh, the only 3 things that you need is name, description, and variables, right? So that it knows these are the variables. And then you can keep adding based on based on the hierarchy or whatever, however you want. So like command might have uh, multiple commands. So I do multi, which will be a part of command, right? And then I can provide any name, right? Right now, all these 3 are part of environment that I want, right? So when I go to the test, this is how my test will look like, right? So I'm giving environment URL. This is how I'm calling those variables, right? Because it's already loading that common.yaml file. So all I need to do is give the hierarchy. So I'm telling it, if I go to common.yaml, I'm telling it from the environment parent, pick the URL, right? And I can basically do this as well, right? So I can name this as, so it won't allow me to have duplicates. It will give me a marker, red marker. So I can say this is my dev environment and this is my whatever uh, URL path and command is. So I can give here dev flash training. So you don't have to keep. So if I add my test here, I will be specifying a URL, right? And if I keep adding test, let's say there are 50 tests, then I had to go in all the 50 tests and change the URLs, right? So this way, I'm only keeping my uh, keeping my YAML of which is a configuration intact, and all I need to do is change in one place because this is what I'm calling in all the functions, right? So that's the ease of it. And then I can do like this environment.url, and I need a path. So the next, so this is an automatic concatenation. So you don't need to be worried about anything. The only thing that you need to be worried about is giving the right parent and child, right? And this is my complete URL. And then again, the method is get response. Now what we are doing is we want to see some response, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna print this response. This function is an external function that I've written in Python. I'll show you how. And then we are saving the JSON author in a variable called first val, right? So let me execute this and show you how uh, the report will, the print function will look like. I've already executed. So let me see if I have. So this is my log file. So this is the print log function that I've printed. It's giving me the whole details. Someone was asking last time, how can we see the response? This is how you, this is one way to see a response where you're getting all the response of what you are requesting. This is the response that I'm getting, right? Now, let's move on to the helper function where I will tell you how to create those helper functions, right? So when we come here, it says there, I'm using this a function which is in a package called library and a file called helper, and the function is print log, right? So I'm going to open I created a package called library, and I created a function called helper, right? Now, the helper function is basically, again, associated with a custom logger that I've written. I'll show you what it does. But what all it's doing is with a very simple, uh, very simple logging function. It's logging the info. It's dumping the response into a JSON format, right? This response, when you call the function from the test, the response will come automatically in that function. So you don't need to be worried out because the response is inbuilt into this function through this, because we're calling this high level function calling verify response with. So it automatically gives you the response inside that function. So all you need to do is call that function, right? So I'm calling the response, parameterizing in terms of an argument and getting that response. And then I'm basically formatting that response into a real JSON format and not the JSON object format. Let's look at the custom logger. This is how I'm writing the logger. It's nothing too uh, difficult. What I'm doing is I'm using a library called inspect. What it's doing is it's creating a logger for me. And then when the logger is created, I'm handling it at a debug level. And I'm using a file handler where all the logs will be written in a file called automation.log. The mode is append mode. And then the formatter will tell me what kind of formatting I need, right? So I'm adding the process ID, the time, the module is basically your package, the line number, which is executed, the function name, the level name, and the message, which is a custom message that I generally give, right? And the date format on how it should look like. So if I look at the log, so first we have a process ID, then we have the datetime format, then we have the library from where it has been run, and then the line number, and then the print log, what it gives. What it gives me is a better handle on debugging, right? Now I exactly know this message or an error message or a log message has come from this library, right? So when I go to debug, I can clearly see I can modify a helper. So let's go to helper line number 10, which is this. So this is what it's showing me. If there is an error on this, then I know exactly where to look and change the modification, right? So this is basically any questions till now? I know it looks a little complicated, but it's really not. Custom logger is something that you don't need to write. You can use a Python built-in logger where you will just log the info uh, in a log file. But I wanted some custom formatting that I really like. That's why the custom logger is the way that I'm selecting because the formatting is much more. Uh, uh, that's my intended way of looking and doing debugging. It's very much easier for me to know exactly what library, what line number had the issue, right? So I'll go through one more time. All you need to do is go to this function, go create a new test where you're using common uh, common configuration variables, and then I'm verifying the response, not with the custom, not like I did here, where I'm directly validating status code headers and JSON. I'm writing an external function which will help me to verify better or to verify or to do many things that uh, that Tavern itself has not implemented, right? So this print functionality Tavern has not implemented. So we can actually write just a one line code to actually get that printing logging done for us, right? And then I'm saving that JSON author values into a variable called first value. If I write my next test, I can just use this variable, which will have the author name for further execution of the test, right? So there might be a test that says, uh, let's search by author, right? I don't have the author name. I first fetch all the authors from the existing path, and then see if there is an author that exists. I get that different code from a different API, right? Not the same API. So, for example, uh, how much money has been paid to the author will not be implemented in a single API. It might be a different API implementation altogether, uh, because the pricing engine might be a different engine altogether, right? So that's the concept of microservices, right? You don't keep everything in one place, right? Because you don't want certain information to be available to everyone, right? Uh, so the microservices also helps you in creating that differentiation between the groups of people where you want that API to be provided. That's one way of implementing. The other way is to add security layer on top of it, where you add JWT tokens to know the access of level of access that you want to give it to your users, right? And then in a very simple manner, custom logger, this is doing nothing, just using the inbuilt logging from Python, but I'm using a handler so that I can actually log into a file which I provide and in a particular format, right? All right, any questions till now?
Sumit, I have a question. So these will accept only if the request and response type is JSON, right? Like if you have any other media type, like XML.
No, it does. It does accept GraphQL queries. Uh, it does accept XML, but then but then the XML implementation uh, is very custom, right? So you have to write a lot of custom functions for it, right? The inbuilt of Tavern is JSON format,
Oh,
right? There, the you can do XML, but I would not recommend it because you will get a response in a certain format, right? Now, what you do with the response is totally up to you. Tavern helps you to have a very advanced functionality of JSON where it parses it by itself, and then you just use uh, the tokens and the variables that you need value from, right? But in XML, you have to create your custom parser. Tavern won't do it for you.
okay. Thank you.
Right? You can do it, but I wouldn't recommend if you're doing XML response. Uh, Not recommended.
Sumit, in place of the custom logger, so this is like you customized. Like if we use like default logger, like how we can define that one? Like
So it's really simple. The basic implementation of Logger is here. So you import logging, and then you basically give the log level of whatever log level you want to give, and then just call that logger, right? And give the file name. You won't be using a formatter. You don't need a new function, a new function for the logger, right? This logger is already built in, which is basically this logger is what? Logging.getLogger logger name. And I'm giving the logger name as here. So the logger name is by default your module that you have selected. But here I'm using inspect to tell that this is what my logger name should look like, right? And then once the logger name is there, so wherever you see logging dot or anything start with logging, it's all inbuilt. I'm just adding a functionality of file handler and formatter on top of it, right? Otherwise, file handler, it automatically comes with logging, but it will not format at this value. It will add, and here's the thing, why it needs to be separate, right? The idea is that I can use this function uh, in a very easy way to write one-line logs, right? I'm still calling that log, instantiating that logging. But then if I don't use this class file, then I have to write everything again, right? Let's leave the formatter for now, file handler for now. You don't need it. This will be your custom. This will be your default, right? If I remove everything, if I remove this, uh, logger name will be your default. You don't need this. You don't need this. The only thing that you need to give is the log level and your file handler if you want a custom name. And then that's it. And then you will call that logger and you will tell log dot func whatever log dot info or log dot debug, right? But then you have to do this in every file.
Yeah, yeah, got it.
And there's one more challenge that you will face when you write it in every file, that when the Python compiles the package, every file will create a logger for you. So you will see a lot of duplicate entries getting in the Python log files, right? And then it becomes very hard to really see what logging is being done because it's such a mess, because the JSON itself, right, is huge when it comes to responses. We are just writing our custom response, right, that I'm getting from the Flask API that we created. But there, but in general, at enterprise level, some of the responses are huge, right? They might be in MBs, right? It might be a 3 MB response, right? And that means it's a million rows of data, right? And you
Yeah,
won't be able to read it.
true.
All right, so let's move on. I see a chat. So let's move on to the documentation of Tavern, right? Oh. So this is, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, it is visible.
Right. Okay. So when you go to taverntesting.github.io, this is basically what is presented to you. It gives you a brief overview of uh, how to do a quick start and then how to run. Here, they are not using talks. So uh, if you're not running through talks, the command that you will do is uh, basically saying, uh, oh, they're not given a command here. So, so if you're not using PyTest, you can directly run giving the command tavern and then the name of the test. Uh, it's not recommended though, because we need some kind of a wrapper on top of it to make it easier for the execution. So let's move to the documentation part, right? Uh, so a good point to note is that it doesn't support Python 2.7. It support 3.4 version and up. So if you are below 3.4, Tavern won't run because it needs the libraries that are built on top of 3.4. Right. So this basically gives you a brief overview of the documentation, the table of contents. We'll move to some of the examples that I want to discuss. Uh, the first thing is, so if you look here, this is what we have already covered. Uh, you don't need to do that. Uh, so we have already covered the stages and the multi-stage test. So multi-stage is where you have one name and then you have another name. So it won't treat it as two tests. It will treat this as one test only, but then you can use uh, some of the variables that you have stored here, like JWT key and this key. You can use that in the next stage, right? Let's move to the basic concepts, not to the examples. Variable formatting, a variable I have already told. It's more like a variable key, and this is how you can define what formatting you want to give it to it. So key name is basically a string. So if you put S, it's a string, uh, and other formatting you can do with it, right? Otherwise, a variable key, what you store will not know what kind of value this is. But if you specifically want to store it in a particular format, you can do that with providing this colon and what kind of formatting you want, right? And then this is basically a GraphQL query that you can write. This is what it will hit when you send the request. So it does have some. It's not fully functional on GraphQL, but you can definitely use it. The only thing is that you might need more custom functions to be written when you get the response back. But hitting the GraphQL is pretty simple from here, right? And then request variables. Again, the request variables, you can add them as your variables that you really want to pass, uh, like a welcome message, and then which says hello. And then this is basically your body, right, of the request. And then the environment variables we have already discussed. Calling external functions we have already discussed. Built-in validators. So there are a lot of validators that are built in that you can utilize. So JWT is one validation where you can validate JWT directly without even putting in a function that validates the JWT, right? And then this is important where you are injecting an external data into the request. Uh, this you can be use like this, where you are creating a custom function and you're adding that data into the body. Pretty simple. Do you want to increase my font? Is it better now? And then you go through the response where you can the save the response in particular format. So like for this test, we have saved uh, the author name on the in a variable called first val. We'll not go to the more complicated example. We'll do it in our framework session. Strict key checking, we have already told that we define it in our talks, where the strict key, we generally keep it off. But if you want to validate the whole response, then keep it on, right? Because what will happen is if you're validating the whole response and you keep it off, if the response you get has more data, it will still pass, right? Because that data is contained in a bigger JSON response, right? But if you keep the strict on, right, then it will fail, saying that it's not the exact match what you provided, right? So this becomes important. You can definitely uh, add this as a parameter in your config, saying that for this test, the strict should be on. For this test, the strict should be off. All right, let's move. So you can turn off the body, and you can change some of the settings in the test itself, where you're turning JSON off and headers on, your JSON off, headers off. So these are some of the strict checking parameters that you can turn off and on. So I'll not go through this reusing request. So the reusing request is basically you create a top anchor, which is basically if I go here uh, to my function, the name, I can create a top anchor here uh, with a particular name saying and uh, reuse, right? So this becomes my anchor. Now this whole test is one block that I can call again in the next stage, right? I don't have to write this again. I will just call this, sorry, I'll just call this and it will automatically execute this. What happens here is that you you sometimes want to follow reuse this again and again. Let's consider this as a login function, right? So what will happen is in your next test, you will need a bearer token to exactly hit the API, but for that you need to log in, right? Now you have to write this whole block of code again. In order to avoid that, I I made it as a top anchor where I can just call this using a star and it will execute this whole block for me, right? You can also validate external files with it. I'll show how to do that in the next session. But it's pretty simple. You just create an external. So whatever the Tavern doesn't allow you to do, you create an external function to do that kind of validation. So I'm getting the response from Tavern, right? Now what I want to do with the response is validate that response with an external file, which I have stored, right? Now I have the response, but Tavern doesn't do directly comparison with a file, right? So what I will do is I'll take that response with me, I'll create a Python function, and that Python function will read the external file that I want and then compare the two, right? So my most of the tasks that I had is coming from response, right? Now all your functions mostly will be either on your reusability or on the validation side, right? Like getting the count of authors. Tavern doesn't have a method that gives me the count of authors in that response, right? It has certain limitations from that sense. And it's not Tavern. No tool will give you those kind of functions to allow you to do your custom use case, right? And let's assume I I have a specific author that I fetch from somewhere. Now I have to reiterate through the whole response to find that particular author. That is doable in Tavern. But when it comes to very specific use case, which says that get me the count of authors and then go to another API, get all those authors book prices and see if we are able to validate it with the database that we have, right? And then one more thing, let me open another project that actually that's not, yeah, that's I cannot open that. It's a company project. But let me go to a specific topic. One is marking test that I really want to show you. So there are some marks that you can do, and then uh, like for in this example they have marked as slow and fast, but you can do whatever custom marker that you have. And when you create go to the talks and create a command, you can just use this marker, right? Because you have already marked those tests, so your file naming will not matter at all, right? Because what it's going to see check is it will go through all the files that you have, all the YAML files it will have, and then it will look for the marker that is that you have mentioned in those files, right? So in that case, this is a recommended practice because file names are not ideally, you can have thousands of file names, right? And then how will you have to call one by one if you want to run multiple files, right? You have to create multiple commands. So the way we do is we create our markers where we say that, okay, these are the tests that we're going to run in prod uh, prod environment, and these are the tests we're going to run in dev environment, right? So those markers really help you streamline your execution process. So what I will do in the next session is I'll add some of these items in the framework, and then I will go through it one by one. So what I'm discussing here is not external functions itself, but they're part of the framework, right? The marker is a very important concept in the framework where you decide what test to run in which environment using the markers and not the file names, right? So even if you change the file names, that will not change uh, any of your execution properties, right? Also, this is a very important concept that you can add delay between the test. The reason is uh, there might be some big responses that come back that takes time, right? Or the server is so slow that it takes time to get the response back. But if you are fetching something from that response and using it in the other response, uh, then your other test will fail because you're running it in parallel, right? The idea of framework is that you don't run this in sequence. That's why you your need is to make these tests independent, right? And not dependent on each other. The reason is the execution time, right? If I run 10 tests in parallel, it will reduce my execution time by 1/10, right? And if I have 500 tests, think about the time saving that the execution will have, right? So that way, the big part of the framework is we need to make our test independent. And one of the concept of making the test independent is that there needs to be a functionality that adds delays between the request. So in this example, the server responds instantly, but in this, the task take 3 seconds to complete, right? So you might be looking at some tasks that you need to do beforehand. You hit the API, right? So that was we need to add some kind of delay, and that's one good part about having this functionality. So let's go to advanced cookbook. So a Tavern also gives you a flexibility to run with Docker in the next, uh, after the framework session, when we are creating our CI/CD pipeline, which is the session after the framework, we'll be using this. We'll be using two tools to run our test. One is that we'll install it with the Docker, and the other is we'll use Jenkins to create our pipelines. So I'll showcase this at that time. This is some of the examples where uh, what kind of request you are going to send. There are some APIs where you need to upload files as part of the request. You can do it with this, where you are basically telling what file you need to upload and what is the URL of that file, and then what's the response you're getting. Uh, you can do it as two ways. One is a multi-part, or you can use it as a body of the request, right? It all depends on what kind of upload your use case has, right? Timeout on request, it's a very good functionality and a very useful one, because let's assume you sent a request, but you're not getting a response because the server is either hung or the server is not, the connection is lost between the server. In that case, your test will keep running, waiting for the response to be back. So here you can define your custom timeout period. Redirects. Let's go to the plugins. These are basically MQTT queue, uh, where you can create those custom plugins. I'm not sure if anyone is using MQTT in their work environment, but let's leave it for now. It's a little advanced concept. Most of
Sumit, this MQTT is a protocol for IoT, something like that, right?
That's correct.
No? Yeah, yeah. I think it's for the technology guys for testing MQTT protocol. You can use Traven. That's what are you saying?
It's a IoT client.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay. Okay. So here, when you meant MQTT, what do you mean? Like how Traven can be used for this MQTT?
Yes. So you can use Tavern to test MQTT.
Okay. So as a client towards the server. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
So that's why I said it's a little advanced concept, because it totally involves testing the protocol, right? Which is over HTTP, and then it's like just like you have uh, WebSocket protocol, right, which runs over HTTP. MQTT is a similar lightweight protocol that runs over HTTP. So you can basically replicate those requests that you send over MQTT and then test those.
Yeah, understood. Good to know. Thanks a lot, Smith.
No problems. So I think that's pretty much the functions that we can use uh, and build things on top of existing Tavern concept. The idea is that you can go as complicated as you want with this, right? And you can keep it simple based on your use case. It it This is the flexibility that we actually need. We want to keep things simple, but then if there is a requirement to go more complex, we should have that flexibility to basically do those things. You don't need to do it right now. It's basically the complex part only comes based on your use case, right? If you go into other use cases, you will not understand why that complexity is there. But then at a basic level and at the framework level, you're pretty much simple enough to ramp up easily, create that pipeline, create that infrastructure and run through it, right? The complex part, when the complex part comes, then you exactly know that this is my use case and I only need to implement this part, right? So that becomes, even if it is complicated, it's not that big that it cannot be implemented, right? So don't look at these documentation into too much detail until and unless you move mostly through the basic concepts, right? And then leave these parts for now, the advanced cookbooks and other things. But these are pretty simple concepts that you can do, that you can go through and get your hands on some of the external functions. And then in the next session, I am on time today. And in the next session, we'll talk about frameworks and how to implement one of the frameworks that will include some of these concepts that we already talked about. So I just wanted you to go through the documentation, to walk you through the documentation on what you need to read and what you guys need to look into the documentation, and some of the important external functions and advanced functions that I've added here. But when we come to framework, I will combine all of these concepts and show you what a real framework looks like, and where we'll basically start creating framework from next session onwards. That will be again a code along and hands-on part. Any questions on this?
This is good, Sumit, because I do agree, right? If you just have to learn Tavan, probably we can spend another, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months, maybe a year or more, right?
Exactly.
So, obviously what's more important in our Codeathon session is to introduce the tool, give enough enabler for the attendees to further develop on that, right? So which is I think you are in line from your training program point of view. The other aspect here is, if someone wants to learn, let's say, for example, MQTT testing using Tavan, right? So that's why we have something called as a study group, which is led by Joy and other people. So those who are interested to learn, for example, Tavan over MQTT, then they can come together and in the study groups, they can learn through our, if someone wants to lead that, for example, they can ask us and we can create a separate meeting request for them, and then they can bring people together and learn. And obviously in the study groups, experts from Testoper community also will come and help you guys, right? So, long story short, for understanding the details on a particular topic, delving into the details is something that our attendees have to create a study group and develop further skills around that, right? So that's what I meant. And yes, again, Mr. Sumit, you are on time today, so I don't want to further waste your time and others' time. Let's close this call.
Yeah, I just have one thing, Kadir. My only ask from the group is that you go ahead, open the documentation, and try to find how to do data-driven concept, how to implement that in Tavern. It's simple enough, but I want you guys to go inside the documentation, take a look at the documentation and find how do you data drive your test, right? That will be a part of framework, but then I want you guys just to go and look through it so that if you have any problem navigating the document, we can resolve that issue in the next session.
Awesome, Sumit. So after Tavan, what is the plan? Is this being finalized, Sumit? So that, maybe next week you can finalize and tell to the team?
Yes. So we have, I have 2 or 3 frameworks and tools in my mind. I'm finalizing on which one that we should go ahead with. I just want to see how much effort goes into those frameworks or tools to basically say that we can complete these sessions in this much time. And with
I don't think that's important, Sumit, because see, this is a Codeathon program, right?
No. So here's the thought process, Kadir. What I'm thinking is not on the time, because we need to do all 3. Which one we should do first is my thought process.
That's okay. So what you wanted to pick, I think you are the trainer, so you can pick one, right? If you go to the audience, preference might be left and right? It would be difficult. So because it's a Codeathon program, for me, the concept of a Codeathon program is we continue to train topic after topic after topic on test automation in this track, right? I mean, the people who continue to learn from us will learn new tools, and they'll continue their journey. That's the concept, and there is no fixed start and end time, right? So Tavan might take for you for another 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then you start the next one. which is absolutely okay. But at least what we need to know to educate the team who's attending now and not attending, but have registered in Testoper Automation in Eventbrite, is to let them know, hey, after Tavern, this is a new thing that's going to come in by sending them an email, right? So that's
Sure.
what it is.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
be good next week. I'll put that in the group next week.
Perfect. And team, I always have these two requests for you. One is hackathon, remember, and second thing is please spread the news about all the good work that we are doing. Get more people to come and learn. And I would be happy to, that's what makes us all volunteers in the Testoper community happy, because that's what we have wanted to do and help you guys, right? So with that, Sumit, with your permission, can I close the call?
Yep.
All right, you guys have a great evening, and I will talk to you guys on Saturday program if you're joining, or next week Wednesday if you're joining this test automation program. Take care and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kader. Thank you, Sumit. Have a great
Thank you,
evening.
Kader. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sumit.
Friday, 7 p.m. hackathon. Don't forget, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.